Welcome. So good to have you here. My name's Valerie Sayers, and I'm just delighted to welcome you all to the final event of the Creative Writing Program's 2021 Alumni Writers Celebration. With my co-conspirator, Sonia Gurnis, it's been my honor and delight to organize this gathering for the past 3 years. Last week, we heard powerful readings from Angela Williams and Ali Araghi. Tonight, Sheheryar Sheikh and Jessica Maich will read. Sheheryar's up first, and I'll begin this introduction by saying that when he first arrived at Notre Dame, Shero was something of a literary whirling dervish in perpetual motion. He was writing highly sophisticated prose. 1 month it was elegant stream of consciousness, the next self-conscious postmodernism, 1 month contemporary satire, then on to folklore from his native Pakistan. His prodigious range and output over those 2 years was humbling to at least one member of the faculty. And yet, it was somehow unsurprising to learn at last week's panel that he also spent years not writing at all, nor that one of the ways he regained the equanimity writing sometimes requires was by becoming a literal whirling dervish, practicing a spirituality of the body that seems to me to explain a great deal about his writing, which is not just full of creative energy, but a beautiful balance of the sacred and the profane. Shero is one of those writers, I suspect, for whom writing itself is both physical and spiritual practice. And he's also one of those writers whose prose doesn't shy away from the real world in all its absurdity. His political satire is intellectually ambitious, darkly funny, and delectably readable. After years working and teaching and writing and whirling in New York and London and back in Pakistan, Shero has landed for now in Canada, where he's completing a PhD at the University of Saskatchewan and continuing to write, including short stories and a dissertation on the inclusion of Muslims and Islam in post 9/11 American novels. He's published 2 novels himself, The Still Point of the Turning World, which was longlisted for the All Pakistan Gets Pharma Award, and Call Me Al, the hero's ha-ha journey, shortlisted for the All Pakistan, both from HarperCollins India. He's capable of savage wit, always delivered with the same elegance I remember from the prose he wrote at Notre Dame, but he still radiates the warmth I experienced during his time here. I'm so happy to welcome him back, Sheheryar Sheikh.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Valerie. I would love to have you introduce me for the next 20 minutes. That was perfect. But yes, I will try to contribute by sharing what I have produced in the past few years. I'm going to be reading 2 excerpts, but and I've written out what I'm going to be saying about them, just so I remain concise. So here goes. I see my novel as a celebration and a critique of Joseph Campbell's concept of a hero's journey, and a novelized examination of the messianism that pervades third world and even global politics these days. Call Me Al is more specifically the story of exile and lust for power that has roots in the 1947 partition when India was split into India and Pakistan. Indian immigrants to Pakistan were treated unfairly in every way and labeled muhajirs, which literally means immigrants. Among the later generations of these immigrants is Al-Tamash, or Al. He starts off with a desire to support the marginalized, but his games grow dirtier and more mafia-like in every sense once he takes hold of the main political party of the immigrants. Eventually, he is forced by those threatened by his mass appeal and his massive crimes into exile in London, England, which is where the present day of the novel takes place. I will read 2 excerpts from Al's story. The first is a bit from his origin story of how he embraced his heroic call to adventure. Here is Al telling how it happens. In the early days, Not having personal conviction in the cause or himself, he mimics the other speakers and delivers his thoughts in short, crisp but snippety sentences, too sharp for the human ear. Someone records a few of his speeches, and Al hears those on tape, not knowing what to do to differentiate himself. Then he hears himself on the local radio news, having been coincidentally singled out as a typical speaker at the local immigration rally. That day, Al decides he will take to the stage in a completely different way. Come the next rally, he's a sight to behold. Among the beige and grey waistcoats, his blood-red silk one with weaved-in snake-like patterns stings the audience's eyes. Only 1,000 students and flies on the wall attend the university event, and most come because there are free refills on the tea. Many plan to escape the hall after drinking their fill. Altamash is the third of 6 speakers on the docket. Each man is allowed between 7 and 10 minutes at the podium to present his vision for achieving more equality for the immigrants. After the second shrill speaker, they announce Al's name. He fixes a Mona Lisa smile on his lips and walks very calmly to the podium. The microphone squeaks with sharp and quick feedback when he approaches it. That is the last dismissible noise from the electrical setup. And though the hall is abuzz with activity over the pouring of beverages and gossip about the latest student-professor seduction scandal, in a few seconds, there will be atomic silence. 1,000 people half filling that room. This is where it will bud and bloom, that burgeoning bloody flower. With dead quiet eyes, he remains standing soundlessly behind the podium. It seems ineffectual at first, and so it is, because the vacuum of sound spurs the Karachi University students on and loafers to speak their vapid opinions in louder whispers. Another speaker, another blah blah rant. So what? That's what they're thinking. Gradually, as if from their subtextual collective unconscious, the scattered buzz of gossip notwithstanding, the audience begins to realize there is rhythmic, heavy breathing coming from the speakers. And some will swear later that there is a growl in the bass layer of the sound. It raises goosebumps, this menacing moment filled with nothing but breath, it being let in and let out. A hush swims its way from the walls where the speakers are positioned to the center of the hall. Eyes turn this way and that, checking to confirm the experience of this moment with a meeting of other eyes. And once shrugs have been shared, everyone standing in the tea line or sitting on the broken down seats faces Al. You have all become used to your second-class status, Al says. No ladies and gentlemen, or a Bismillah as a formal opening to his speech. Sound is frozen until his next word. You beautiful people, you glorious intellectuals, you idiots, you cowards, you rangers of independent thought and dependent action, you bloody rascals, you heavenly discards, you creators of nations and martyrs of freedom, you nincompoops. A little noise, a little buzz, then silence again. These are wake-up call words from the speaker, Altamash, the round-faced funny one, the class clown. He isn't being funny right now. He is calling them out. Someone in the audience shouts, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" A few laughs follow in support of that catcall. At the podium, Al snarks, "Call me Dad. I am one of you. I am the broken. I am the one who is being stepped on. I am the hammered nail, the coffin lid. That's me and that's you and that's all the children we will bring into this God-forsaken country. Immigrants is what we are. Getting nailed with our own bodies into our own corner of the ghettos of this big city we are in. We are the cockroaches who dream of becoming butterflies. Look around you, you wasted fleshpots. Meeting up, eating each other's shit. drinking the cafeteria's piss tea. That's all we do. Truth stings the hall. It shames the 1,000 tea drinkers. Nobody slurps from their cups. A girl starts sniffing and someone tells her to leave if she can't handle what is being said, but not to pretend it isn't being said, and not to ask that it not be said, because it needs saying. And finally, yes, finally, thank God, someone is saying it. La, la, la. Altamash sings on stage into the microphone. His first melody, blunt, tuneless, hoarse. La, 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 la. He glares at the 1,000 of them. They wait for the message in his eyes to be translated into actual words. They stand transfixed, holding on to the mad hope that this man behind the podium is the one they have been waiting for. Logic crooners at the microphone have failed to rally them, but this is something else. Madness begets madness. Al stares them down and he steers hope out of that room. You are a gob of saliva, he tells them. You are frothing on the ground. All around you there is dust and garbage, and you are part of it. You deserve nothing more than this piss tea and this heap of broken dreams. He steps back from the microphone. Inside his head, there is a harangue of 6 more minutes, riveting entertainment disguised as excoriation, or vice versa, still waiting to be delivered. But he knows he's placed his bid just at the right cutoff point. They will bet on him here and now. They'll stake their lives eventually, but for now they will give their full attention to this young speaker. There is no need to go into the solutions he's written out for his people. They don't want solutions. They want a savior. He would be that. That was Al in his own words. Now I will read an excerpt about a relatively minor incident from his life in his London exile, as seen through the eyes of one of the characters who gets tangled up in Al's heroic journey in an other dimensional way, which allows omniscient immersion into Al's past inner life. This character, George Gary Gregory Joffer, has grudges against Al, but he is beginning to see that his assumptions about Al may need rethinking. Here he is, watching Al riding a northbound bus in London. Only an expert comedian or a master of tragedy can bring an audience gradually to the climax of true amazement. Off screen once, without any audience, I watch him create some such thing in a bus going up Finchley Road from St. John's Wood to Golders Green. Why is he in a bus, I wonder? Must be one of those spontaneous things he does. And before I know it, I'm thinking his thoughts. Al's on his way to scarf down some kosher beef sandwiches in his favorite Jewish cafeteria in North London. He's got raging pangs. One sandwich won't do. He's wondering whether 3 or 4 will hit the spot. He's hoping for 3 to be enough, but maybe as many as 5 will be needed to do the trick. The bus stops at the O2 Center, and on board climbs the type of group that usually prefers taking the tube, but has settled grudgingly for overground travel this afternoon: football hooligans. Al's sitting near the back on the lower level of the bus, taking up 1.5 seats. The chanting Chelsea fans could go up and take the second level stairs and go up to the second level, which is empty except for 2 people, but they don't. They want to be surrounded by witnesses of their celebration. Just having come out from a pub where they watched on the telly their team beating regular rivals Arsenal, they're pumped up. Bus drivers don't usually tolerate the obnoxious noise level that this bunch of drunks is generating, but this driver must be a Chelsea fan. Chelsea! 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 Just that word. Chanted with variations in length, like it will save lives if elongated for precisely the right number of milliseconds. Louder and louder grow the young ones, with all their fledgling might, shoving their voices into everyone's ears. Al, The football-hating curmudgeon, when he's hungry, that's how he is, looks around at the bus's other passengers. There are old Jewish men and women covering their ears, tut-tutting silently. A woman with her 2 babies in a pram is looking around for help, just in case something erupts. Al shrugs. He's no hero, but his own ears and mind are beginning to hurt. The bus slows down. A high school girl in her uniform at the stop takes a gander at the chanting, hollering Chelsea fans and refuses to board. The bus moves on. This is enough. Al gets up. Hey, he says. The seated old Jewish folks are looking at him like he's an ineffectual Moses. What can this overly large brown man do? Their eyes ask. He doesn't mind. Al loves to surprise from a position of disadvantage. The jolly chanters stare a glance his way when he stands, but his voice doesn't reach them. They're still going at the one word in their vocabulary like zealots hopeful of imminently unlocking nirvana. Hey! Al shouts, making his voice carry. Shut the F up! We know what team you support. Just the kind of thing the group has been looking for. A target for their energy. This will be fun. The old folks and the young mother can see the chanter's target eyes begin to articulate a different kind of mantra. And then out it comes from a pipsqueak's mouth. You Paki! Another one balls up his fist and lifts it to his face. Paki, you want a piece of this? Brown man Al walks a step forward. The narrow aisle between the seats doesn't allow him to move except in a sideways shimmy. The hooligans laugh their heads off at the spectacle he makes. Fat, cocky bastard, says a drunk, blue-eyed, long-haired, blonde-pressed punk. And the others pick it up. Cocky bastard, cocky bastard. It's been 8 seconds or more since anyone has said the word Chelsea. Al's almost beginning to miss the torture of it. In front of him, they're all perfectly lined up, like bowling pins. So he grins, Al does, and he begins to brace himself for what he's about to get into. He does this next. He shuffles sideways until the aisle opens up enough for him to move facing forward, and then he runs the 4 steps and launches himself at the group standing nearly single file. The look in their eyes is that of terror, like a building falling on top of them. The first one tries to fend off Al's enormous mass with arms held up. The one behind him pushes at his drunk buddy, but Al's are flying. What makes him do this? Behind him, in the vacuum he's left, the old Jewish folks and the young mother watch him go nearly horizontal in the middle of the northbound bus. The joy in their eyes at having someone thwart noise and boredom and the meaninglessness of life in a world taken over by Chelsea chanters, a world that once belonged to church and synagogue edicts, then political drib-drab before it's come to this lack of any sense other than derangement. That's what he helps them avenge with this flight against reason. This is why he does it, for the joy of the people, even if they're not really his people, except for this little moment on the bus. He gives it everything he's got. In that sacrificial leap, he's made little consideration for his bad back, has Al. He's gone all in. This is not poker. This is not a table for gambling. This is his body, his life. And then he crashes into the first of the lot. The boy goes down under Al's weight, and he dominoes his rude compadres into a heap at the floor at the front of the bus. Only one of them manages to hang on to a railing and to be displaced at an angle relative to the floor. But he's still weighted down by the others. The driver halts the bus. There's a shrill scream from underneath Al. Is the kid okay? He's just shocked. It's immense, the weight on top of him, but he's young. The body will recover from shocks and sprains. What could I have done? What the woman with the babies in the pram does next. She chuckles without sound, like a mad woman. She takes out her phone. She fumbles to open the camera app to take a picture. She wants to share with the world what has happened in her universe, but she's too late. Al gets up, his lower back throbbing a new muscular pain, which he doesn't let on. The bus is still stopped. He walks to the exit in the belly of the bus while the bus driver tries to get a hold on what's happened. Al pushes at the door in the middle of the bus. It resists, but he insists. In emergencies, if forced, it's supposed to give way, and so it does. After he nudges harder, he opens the door and keeps it forced open. Either you fuckers are getting out or the rest of us are, he says. He stares at the louts. The bus driver is looking around at the scene from the seat behind the wheel. He is still unable to say anything. The Chelsea fans are getting up. One's forearm is twisted. Another holds his shoulder. One limps just to prove he tumbled too. What would I have done? What the bus driver does next, he orders the noisemakers off his bus with a flick of his head. Get off, all of you, he said, likely embarrassed by fellow Chelsea fans not surviving Al's weighted assault. One by one, they go past Al at the exit door he's propped open for them. They try not to touch him, squeezing their arms and torsos away from him. They drop off one by one and stare back up at him from the road they've descended to in a single file. Al moves away from the exit, and the driver closes the door with a button on the control panel next to the steering wheel. The bus moves on. 7. That's how many I count. Al took on and vanquished 7 drunk ruffians in public. What would I have done? What Al does next. He shuffles slowly in the narrow aisle sideways back to his seat. The woman with the kids says, "Bravo, bravo." The old folks smile at him. 2 of them pat his shoulder from behind. To them, this feels like Moses come back from the mountain with the word and deed of God. They look like they believe in miracles again. Al nods. He keeps to himself the rest of the way on the bus. He mentally adds 1 more beef sandwich to his original tally. Some things you feel you've earned, and you take them even if you don't need them.
That's great.
Hello, my name is Sonia Gurnis. I am Professor Emerita of the English Department at Notre Dame, and I taught creative writing for 30 years there. I was also one of 3 faculty members involved most heavily in starting the master's program in creative writing in the department. And that makes it a special privilege for me this evening to introduce one of the very early graduates of our creative writing program. Jessica Maich was a 1997 MFA graduate of our program, and she was a bit unusual. Mostly we had 24-year-olds eager to get in there and fight their way to publication. Jessica was, and she confessed this herself the other night, so I'm not telling tales, Jessica was 45. She was already a poet, a teacher of writing, and a mother of 3. In fact, one of those 3, her daughter Kate, later became my student also in an undergraduate poetry class. Because Jessica was born and raised here in South Bend, she very easily bridged the town-gown divide that sometimes is a problem in university towns. And she bridges it in her work also. Her first published chapbook was called The West End, and it's about an ethnic neighborhood in which she and her, I think, grandparents lived and loved and functioned. That became the title of her first book, The West End. And one of the poems from it, and I don't think I can pronounce this, but I'm going to try, the Robokowski sisters, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Jessica published 2 more chapbooks, 24 Questions for Billy, takes an intense and very personal look at death. Treatment Island takes again an intense look at the effect on a family of a terminal disease. Jessica's had poems published in journals as diverse as JAMA, the American Medical Association Journal, the National Catholic Reporter, the Notre Dame Review, and her poems are included in an anthology, And Know This Place, the Poetry of Indiana. Jessica still lives in South Bend, or perhaps more correctly, Granger. She has taught writing and writing classes at St. Mary's College. She has become a member of my poetry group. And for me, most important of all, she's my friend. So please welcome Jessica Maich.
Thank you, Sonia. I understand what you meant, Shero. I could ask Sonia to go on and on too. It's a lovely thing to have someone say all those nice things about you. Thank you. I am really delighted to be here tonight. I'm so thrilled to be asked, and I just look forward to this all day with a little bit of nervousness, but mostly looking forward to it because I'm just so grateful to be part of this group. It's been very important to me in my life, and the connections I made while in the MFA program at Notre Dame have been sustaining throughout my life. So with thanks to the program for this. I thought about my reading a lot and was stuck because I couldn't figure out how to start. It seemed like the pandemic was in the way of going through and choosing poems. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the pandemic. I don't think anyone needs me to focus on that, as we've all been through it for a long, long time now. But I cannot just skip it. So I have to start this way, and then I'll move on from there. My first poem is called A Swarm of Shadow. Illness came, though we could not see it that spring through the trees with their green palms opening. Could not hear the letters of your name chewed on and spit out as far thunder, nor imagined that familiar rumble would come back to haunt us as particular and forewarning. It did not seem that you could be so singled out from all of us, row upon row of other choices. That spring, we could not see beyond the promise of the yearly change, the year unmasked as sorrow. A swarm of shadow moving across the moist fields towards us with its steady eye of purpose on you. And I guess what I would say is that's how it felt to me. The pandemic felt like a swarm of shadow was coming for every living human being. So with that in mind, I'd like to read Pandemonium, mid-March 2020. I opened the page, so clean and white, to the virus, lurking possibly everywhere on any surface. A vivid imagination has never been more costly. Hooking its red spikes into the arc of my life in a frantic attempt to connect, to grab hold of continuance, I see my enemy is not much different than me. Let me live, it turns out, is our weirdly shared mantra. I pray, please save me from this replicate of every monster I've ever feared in the dark, those imagined by my childhood eyes, or prowling my present sleep. Fear, it turns out, is a heavy backpack, and possibly instruct people in the lost art of being quiet, not sharing every thought that comes their way, as we all could use some open airspace in our stay-at-home orbits. Because if you forgot, and I can't imagine you ever will, we are living through a pandemic. Okay, got that out of my system. So now I will go on. This next poem is called Night Picnic. There's a little phrase from Emerson to begin. If the stars came out once every 1,000 days, then would we adore? If the sky were to dangle but a single star on a string, and dangle that star on one night of each year, one summer night. Picture the front yards peopled by dusk, with trays of snacks and iced beverages carried out through the open screen doors. Imagine the hustle and the bustle of preparation. So remarkable a star, even the old people would wobble out, young ones half carrying and half dragging blankets for Aunt Jean. Bug spray passed from yard to yard, and the dark houses empty as torn pockets. Sleeping infants ferried out under a heavenly sky, a sky that washed and polished a word and hung it crystal clear out to shine. Let's see. My dad is still alive, and he's 93 and has just begun to have some health problems. His mind is completely intact and sharper than mine, I believe, actually. But I've just got to spend more time with him lately, as he will finally admit and take some help. So it's been a delight. It's a heartbreak and a delight at the same time. This came from one of those days. Wednesday afternoon. To enter his house is to pull on a glove without struggle. He is asleep now in his green chair, which lifts to standing with the press of a button. Once inside, I decide not to wake him and sit, coat and gloves on, boots shedding the snow of deep winter. Watching my once larger than life father sleep as someone ancient and frail feels like some sort of invasion, but I continue. I do not know how love grows, but it has grown between us in his decline. He and I are tied in a knot so beautiful and complex, it has not been invented yet. It's so very quiet. This next poem goes back actually to the Balkan War of the mid-90s, I guess. But the part that I was thinking about is that, unfortunately, you could substitute a lot of different places for this, and it all remains the same in some ways. Learning to spell Sarajevo. Number 1. Sarehevo, and nothing comes up on the screen. Sarejevo, and still nothing. There are people nearby I can ask for help, but I don't. I am ashamed to admit that I cannot spell Sarajevo. 2. On television here, it looks so far away. There, shattered glass lies everywhere. The worn ground holds bodies not meant to be there. Children who carried the universal command grow up, now lay in pieces, unmakeable puzzles within a box. A hill of hurried crosses, dried blood on breadcrumbs. Do I want to know these stories? 3. My friend and her mother once went to the former Yugoslavia. It was quaint, she said, like taking a step back in time. Now it is nowhere to live if you expect to live as you once did, without the hum of death behind your ear. 4. The way they use the letters of the alphabet in that place. Vowels are often missing or attached to the tail end of a word, like a kid brother allowed to tag along. Consonants cluster on street corners as if it's Saturday night. So many J's besides so many V's. So few VJ days in sight for the people in that place. 5. The Human Rights Watch of Helsinki names some names in their report. 6 men to be exact, 6 to tip the iceberg. These men like mold gone crazy upon a country. The more atrocious the act, the more pleasure at the bottom of it, a deeper feeding frenzy. 6. In the camps, people feel relatively safe, but not at home, and time goes on mindless of their missing happiness. For the old ones, there is the question below the surface of every day: will I die in this place of my refuge? 7. I have tried to hold you at arm's length, skimming the evening papers, determined not to smell death written into the lines about you while in my own home. I have a right to believe what I want about the world. Yet as much as I try, I can't seem to remember to forget the 4 children killed while sledding, snow so white before blood let go of a life. So I sit today, a middle-aged woman in America, struggling to learn how to spell Sarajevo. Next poem, I think if you write, and there are many people watching today or with us today that are part of the creative writing program, if you write, you have some relationship or you know well that it's kind of a love-hate thing sometimes. You just love it sometimes, and sometimes it could just drive you crazy. So this next poem kind of speaks to that. I really mean it this time. I sit on the front steps, my poem beside me, just the 2 of us. I'm trying to begin a conversation we need to have, figuring I owe the apology. There are hurt feelings concerning unfinished lines. So I venture a feeble sorry, which evokes a cold poetic shoulder, as if I should know better, and I do. Always use specifics. So I try again. I'm really sorry for not opening the door you stood beyond in the rain, for believing choir practice had precedence and busyness a virtue, and for often choosing the other thing, place, or person, leaving you standing there unacknowledged, waiting for me to make eye contact. I mentioned my father is still alive. My mom died about 7 years ago. And like so many people would relate to, I think my family, extended family, had trouble deciding how to deal with her things once she had passed away. Packing up our mother's clothes. If opening the bureau drawer seemed a clear violation of your privacy, then touching the cloth that once touched you felt a sacrilege. So we waited through several seasons before we tried again. Tiny ghosts and goblins rang doorbells in the dark, and pumpkin pies graced holiday tables. After the first, a serious winter barreled in, so we waited for good weather, or so we told ourselves. Finally, the world filled up with birds returning and clear sky and color. And we knew it was time to take that step back into your closet where you had stood and dressed for life. And this is the place in the poem where the turn is supposed to happen, meaning redemption of some sort out of great difficulty. But this is not that poem, and we did not feel redeemed bundling into trash bags for safe passage to the donation center your favorite things. No, this is not that poem, nor that short story or novella. This is rather a simple lamentation, sung one empty hanger at a time. One of the things that has been so nice for me, I know I'm speaking a lot about my mom and dad actually tonight, didn't realize that when I picked the poems, but is that my father got interested in cooking after my mother passed away. And so we have had many, many fun times cooking together. I like to cook, and he likes to eat. And so it worked out, and we have had a good connection in that way. Cooking with my father. A single green pepper and several onions rest on the counter with the turmeric he went out and purchased this morning. As I walk in, he tells me we will make a stew. I saw this recipe in the paper for a simple Brunswick stew, he says. And you know, there's nothing like a one-pot meal. I agree. And he suggests I read through the recipe to make sure he's gotten everything out that we will need. I do just that as he waits, like someone who has handed in an exam. It's all here, I say, though the measuring spoons date back to his early years with my mom and have flattened a bit over their 60 years together. So we may be a tad light or heavy on the turmeric, but it really doesn't matter. Nor does the size of his diced pepper. It's perfect, I say, though it's much too large, but who cares? We are making a meal together in his kitchen. My mother is gone, as is the world outside this house today. All that matters is the feeling between us, food lovers, wife and mother missers, cooking our way back home. The Woman and the Rain, Volvanag. I dreamt last night a story, or at least that the tabloids ran out of stories about Elvis and started in on someone else like you. Picasso sighted near Versailles selling souvenirs. Or a woman claims Picasso her secret gardener/lover these past 23 years. All in all, it all falls flat. For the blue truth is, this is your dead period, and the idea of you gyrating in a sequin suit is ridiculous, because sequins never were your style. But that's the tabloids for you, though poems are not tabloids. So how do I tell this story in a poem? Simply that it really happened one summer in France, where I was with my family. We had come across the ocean to see nothing in particular and everything. The guidebook said Volvanag, a picturesque setting with a magnificent view of Picasso's castle, his final resting place. We had come then to see you at your end, or so we thought, even me, not realizing that I had come to apologize for that February when my high school English class took a bus trip to Chicago to see Laurence Olivier in Othello. He was great, but greater still was the unleashed freedom of the day. White caps combing the back of Lake Michigan. And how you fit into all of that takes something of a tabloid imagination, as we waited after the play in a group under your unnamed sculpture. And for some reason I could never explain, when they asked, or to myself, I rolled up my scarf and threw it skyward, where it snagged on the nose of your nameless creature, too high to retrieve, no matter what we did, until what we did was stand like sheep. Walking back to the bus single file, the red scarf looked like a dripping wound, or so our teacher said, among the other things she said, while no one else said a word, the 90 quiet miles home, except the bus, which groaned with shame. Which was not far away as we walked up the hill to your castle that day, the irreverent scarf hanging fresh in my memory. But first things first, this was France and time for lunch. So we settled in at the cafe and others followed, tourists mostly, and some villagers, filling the air with a language bouquet and the hide-and-seek sun and the blue umbrellas, and the guidebook was right when it called her proprietress. For she came to our table neither young nor old, but somewhere beyond surprise, halfway in between the middle of everything, not noticeably anything but friendly, though not too friendly. Tolerant of us and those like us who happen to stop by on our way to your everyday castle. And she worked her way around the garden, taking each order before going inside, as if we were all part of one big family. Until enough but not too much time had passed and the food appeared and each table got lost in itself. At first, the rain came down like dots, coloring the covering stone of the low brick wall beside us, deepening the concrete in color. Then taps began ticking, beside on the umbrellas, like summer moths crazed for blue light. And finally, there was a pounding of liquid bullets pelting the air, which sent us scrambling for cover, except for the one native left among us, a workman with speckled boots, who stayed and ate, intent on the business of his lunch. He gathered his food up tight in the hoop of his arms and squeezed until everything of value was under the umbrella's protective wing, then poured himself another glass of wine from the bottle on the table, as if it wasn't raining at all. And she, who had dried off by now, was standing back in the doorway when he lifted his glass to toast her, watching, and the rain. Surprised, she began to laugh and called to her husband to come out from his cooking. Wiping his hands on his apron and laughing himself, he yelled, "Bien, bien." But the workman only smiled and raised his glass again. By now, the rain was serious, as was her laughter, and she put her hand across her chest and roared, while the rain roared back, two lions feeding off of each other, as the dry spot under his umbrella disappeared. The rest of us were also watching, first him, then her, as they both watched each other, and some of us were laughing from the sheer infection of proximity. But no one laughed as hard as she, who by now was rocking back and forth, a river taken by its current. And the workman? This much I remember. He was drenched, hair plastered to his sturdy head, but smiling, his mind on the business at hand. And I know he wasn't Christ, but the way his arm circled the bread and the wine, and the way he didn't come out of the rain. And the rest is dreamy, coming after that dream, though I'm sure we must have seen your castle later on that day. And I guess you must have been there, because dead is dead and held in place. But I wonder what you would have thought of that saturated afternoon and how you'd paint the scene of the middle of everything woman and the rain. By the way, I write this poem to talk with you who painted without common sense. Back then, the scarf was the only brush I had. I have one final poem. And as it turns out, I know it's probably unusual to hear of someone who writes poetry having groupies, but it turns out I actually have a few because I got requests from them today to read this poem. Now, I will admit that I do eat Thanksgiving dinner with most of these groupies, so we're pretty connected. Anyway, it's not an extensive list, but still. So I'll finish with this, and thank you for your attention. It's been really a privilege. I want and I want. Whether I should or not, I want the past returned like a Christmas sweater, returned for fit, for size, loose and roomy this time around. A second chance against my knowing, because I want this to work better. So I want the sweater returned, and I want the call to come that says it's on its way. All day with my fingers crossed like a handful of prayers, and my foot against the floor like a hummingbird's wing, and the phone a silent sneer. So I want not to wait myself into deafness for the sound of an answer not coming, because I want someone to hear, and the notion of wanting to stop turning like a revolving door, a dizzying spin of never enough. And I want the knocking against my ribs to stop, that xylophone of longing, because I want the sky not to fall. But if it does and lies there like a broken blue cistern flooding the world with its held rain, I want to know a boat will come and there'll be room for me, even though I want to stop wanting the perfect thing to happen, the sweepstakes, the lotto, the prince, oh so charming. I want not to believe he's coming, to pick myself up off that waiting couch and go on, because I want not to live from the deep crush of not having. And I want the high and low notes of the piano to be played at the end of this, with the arms extended and the head thrown back, signaling it's over. This is the end of your wanting, because I want some answers and I want them now. Thank you very much.
Those were dazzling. Thank you both so much. This has really been a remarkable 3-event series, and all 4 writers have contributed so brilliantly. This is the moment when the audience has a chance to ask questions of both Shero and Jess. And there are 2 ways you can queue up to ask questions. You can write your question in the chat and I'll read it out for you, or you can raise your hand by pressing the little emoticon button under reactions. And there's a 3rd way, which is to physically raise your hands. There are a lot of people here. I'll do my best to catch physical hands, but the more reliable ways are the chat box and the reaction button. While we're waiting, I actually have a question that I was thinking of as you both read tonight. The 2 of you both spoke so beautifully at the panel about the way you separated writing itself, the practice of writing, from your concerns about publishing, and how you put those 2 things in perspective. So I wonder, for the benefit of people who weren't able to make it to the panel, if you could just say a few more words, or the very same words, if that's convenient. Jess? Oh.
You want
go
to?
ahead.
No, you can start.
There you go. Okay. For me, writing has somehow inextricably been linked with publishing, but I do see the processes as having taken shape in my life, at least, very separately. A lot of my work has been practice and craft work that has not seen public eye. And I'm very happy about that, because most of it is rubbish, but also because it helps a lot to keep some things that build into what comes out into the open. So some of it is actually like some sentences that I wanted to put into this novel did not make it into this novel. One, because one of the sentences I actually forgot when the editing process came along, and it was always in my head. But I knew I was going to do it, but it's not there, and it's one of the most perfect sentences that I can think of for this novel. But there are also practice novels in the past. But for me, writing itself, the process itself is, as Valerie said, like she guessed rightly, like it's a very physical process for me. It's an act of worship for me. I believe in writing as a thing in itself that does not require the publication, which is a separate thing that I need, but the writing itself does not need. The writing itself needs just to be a practice.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. I think that for me, the publication part has lagged because, again, I was fortunate enough, I mentioned before, and I'll just say again, to be to quickly get into a writers group that was so supportive and so engaging that that was kind of like the world of writing for me for quite a while. Though I would have to say that every now and then I get the urge. So I publish some chapbooks. So I have some need. It's just not, I guess, a giant need, but it's lovely to actually publish something and have it in your hand, to me, to have the physical presence of it in your hand and know it's a little out there. So I guess I do enjoy that, but I very much have been happy just to begin to feel like my writing is better than it used to be. And I can tell that. And I mean, I think that's always like a goal. You just would like to write better and write something that, really makes you even stop in your tracks thinking, yeah, that's good. I'm happy to be part of that. So anyway, that's my story, I guess, sticking to it.
Thank you. Steve Tomasula, I see your physical hand.
That was great. Thanks so much for the reading. It was really, poignant and, just powerful writing on both of them. Although Shero, I think you do that British thug accent a little too well. But I have a kind of a related question, I guess, since this is a sort of a reunion reading. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, looking back, how you see the relation of the theses or even the work that you did while you're in the program to, the writing that you do later. Like, being an outside reader, I notice little things that I think I have a memory of from like the theses and, when Ali was reading last week too, the same way. And so in a way, it's like the theses is like nothing like the later work that's actually published, but in a way there's sort of echoes of it, I guess. So I'd be curious to hear how, you see the relation between the two bodies of work.
Steve, frankly, my thesis was so long ago, I barely remember it. No, I'm kidding. But when I came into the program, I had never really had anyone workshop my writing. I had never passed it around. I had never had any comments about it. So that whole experience, that was developing a kind of outer skin that I didn't even know I needed to have if I wanted to continue to write, I think. And when I in those workshop settings, you hate it. I hated it at the beginning. I was like, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure. And I'd see other people's work and I'd be like, well, I think this or this. And who knew if I had any clue at all? But over time, I gained confidence in my own sense and began to trust my own sense of my reaction to someone else's writing so that I could offer something. And I think that was like, for me, the big thing that happened when I was in the writing program. I just developed a little bit more of a sense of being able to actually offer something to someone else about their writing. So I'm appreciative of that. That was, something I was happy to have. And it certainly served me well when I got into the writing group. Because again, the people that I got into this writing group with after the program, they were very good. And it would be like they were poetry brainiacs. So you would read a poem and it would be about 14 seconds. And somebody would say, oh, the heart of that poem is, and for me, I was like, are you kidding? Like, wait a minute, slow down, give me a minute to look at it again, So again, now the longer I'm in that group, the more I'm with that kind of timing too. So there's something about confidence in your own sense of the writing of someone else. And I think, of course, that leads to more confidence in your own writing. So anyway, Shero?
For me, it's quite, I quite envy and applaud Ali's vision of that he was working on during the MFA and taking it all the way to refinement and publication. And I'm like, I can't help but clap hands at that. I was so scared when I was finishing up the MFA. My thesis was a collection of short stories, and Stephen, I showed them to you, and I worked on them with Valerie. And I remember vividly all the moments of the fear that I had that I did not have a novel ready, or a book that I was proud of ready. only like short pieces here and there that I thought that, oh, okay, I have like worked hard, but and got some publications and all that, like tiny ones. But when I left, I was very scared that I didn't have something complete. And part of my fears about not being in the writing world and not being able to continue with writing without any insecurity, or let's say non-academic, was the fact that fear I had to lose was the fact that I didn't have to have something complete. That I wrote even up and before MFA, it was hard to abandon them, but I think I needed to. I still feel like I did absolutely the right thing by abandoning them rather than completing them and taking them to a stage where they could be ready for publication. I wrote more complete novels after that. And I'm looking at projects very differently. I think I just needed to complete those projects during the MFA and just right after, just to complete, to see what the whole process does to me, as well as emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, rather than to have the thing refined in itself. So completing one book to see what it does, to see what it opens up, what the processes are, to see what refinement can be done. But I don't want to do the refinement in this one. I want to work on something else that's more important to me. So that helped. But definitely the seeds of hard work, of craft, of gaining knowledge about writing has all been from the MFA. And I credit my teachers over there for it. It's Valerie and Steve and William and Jerry Bruns. I don't know if he's still teaching, but he's been a mentor to me as well. And I credit that seed laying, and after the fears were gone, that has stayed with me, the good stuff.
Any more questions? From Candace Speck's screen, but I know this is not Candace.
Oh, we were on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I adore Jess, and I love Jess's poetry, and I'm excited that I heard things tonight that I never heard before. But my comment is short, and it's to Shero. I was so in love with what you were saying that I just wish you had a better microphone. I could not catch whether it was immigrant or immigrant, but it just things like that. I mean, it's so sad. I want you to have Jess's computer or the leader's computer. Anyway, you deserve to have your words be heard better, and it was lovely. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
We have over the course of a long readings year discovered that Zoom fails us over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I'm often the one frozen. All right. Well, sometimes readings are so great that it just behooves us all to sit in them for a while. And this may be the moment when we can just thank all 4 readers who've joined us over these 2 weeks for such a beautiful experience with all 4 of you. So Ali Araghi, Angela Bickham, Sheheryar Sheikh, and Jessica Maich, thank you for coming back to Notre Dame, for coming to Notre Dame in the first place, we should say. And I want to let Sonia Gurnis have the last word here tonight.
I couldn't help thinking of the last time, the second in our series of 3, when I got to have the last word. And I said, I don't want to say goodbye to you people. We've had such a good time. but I don't have to say goodbye. I can say, we're all going to a party at Valerie's house. So, no goodbyes. And I find myself the same kind of thing. I don't want to let go right now. I want everybody to, come and keep talking and celebrating. And, I invite you to my house, but Valerie's food is better. So I guess what I want to say is that this didn't feel remote. It felt present. And even though we can't raise the glass physically, I just want to join Valerie in thanking all four readers who were wonderful, and thank all of you for coming. As someone who has done quite a few readings in her life, I know how much it means to have any kind of audience, and particularly to have an audience where you can look at the faces, remotely or not, and get some feedback from them, get some sense from those faces that what you are saying is important and has an impact. And a couple of times I cheated on the speakers. I was listening, but I clicked to the gallery view and looked at the faces of those of you who were here remotely. And I want to tell the speakers, because they didn't have the chance to do that, I think, that people really were with you and you had a wonderful audience. So I thank everybody, and I hope we can do this again. And I hope next time it comes with a glass of wine. Okay? Thanks.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you again. It was a treat.